Welcome back, whimsy friends, and actually this week I want to call you my spooky friends because, as the title suggests, this is a story about the time that I lived in a haunted house. And yes, it's a true story that I experienced. It's not something from Reddit, it's not something made up. I actually lived through this, and I do believe in the afterlife, and I do believe in ghosts and spooky things, and nothing really bad happened, so don't worry, it's not that scary, but it definitely was spooky, and I would love to share it because in honor of spooky season, I believe it's fun to share our own little experiences with the afterlife or with the unknown. I have a very delicious pumpkin spice latte that I made for myself in this very cute little Halloween cat mug. Go ahead and get yourself a cute little fall drink, sit back, relax, maybe turn the lights down a little bit and enjoy the spooky story. So it's perfect weather for me to be telling this because there's a crazy storm happening outside. The only downside is I am competing with the rain that's bashing up against my window. So if you hear like weird noises, there's like the remnants of a hurricane happening outside. So yeah, sorry about that. So I feel like in order to tell this story properly, I have to set the scene of where I was in my life. Our story begins in the summer of 2018. I believe I was maybe 26, somewhere around there. And I had just showed up to my very first duty station. I was in the Army. And my first duty station was at Fort Hood, Texas. And as soon as I got there, literally within a week, they sent me on my first deployment. So I go on this deployment overseas and I'm in Poland, you know, nowhere crazy, but I was in Poland a few months and it was really fun and I was really enjoying myself, meeting new people, and, you know, nobody was back at Fort Hood, everybody was deployed. And I was having a great time, but unfortunately I had a very bad fall. And I tore the labrum very badly in my hip, my right hip. And because of that, I couldn't walk for months without crutches. And so unfortunately I had to be sent home early from my deployment. This was around mid-September-ish. So if you remember, like I said, I showed up to this new city and this new base, not knowing anybody, and they immediately sent me forward to my deployment. I didn't get a chance to meet anybody or even get a place to live. All of my stuff was still in storage. I had no time to get myself an apartment or rent a home or find a roommate or anything like that. So I come back mid-September and I'm kind of freaking out because I can't really walk. I don't know anybody. I've only been here for maybe 2 or 3 days before I deployed, and I need to find a place to live. And I don't know anybody. So, you know, this is the situation that I'm in right now, just to paint the picture. We'll call it a little bit desperate. So I'm on my search. This is the first time I'm really looking for my own apartment in my own house in my life, essentially, because I had lived in a house before that, but it was provided by the Army and they had done everything for me. So this was the first time I had been looking for a place on my own, completely alone, not knowing anybody, living in a new city. This is really scary. It's a real like coming of age moment for me. So I'm like looking through all of these homes that are available. And at the time I was staying with this guy who I thought was my friend, but he ended up being really creepy. So I was trying to get out of that house as soon as possible. So that's another added thing that I thought I was staying with a friend who I could stay with for maybe a couple weeks till I found a place to live. But this person ended up being really creepy and made me really uncomfortable. So again, I was like, I need to get out of here. I need to find a place as soon as possible. So I'm looking through all these homes and I'm looking on like Trulia or something like that. And I find this picture of this house that's like very cute. It's very old, very cute cottage charm, which if you know me, I love old things. I love cottage vibes. I love old Victorian. I just love things with character. And so immediately seeing that over all of the other apartments and like newer things, I was like, well, that's awesome. And I would get my own house versus an apartment. I also, at this time, had my 2 dogs and I wanted to have a yard for them because I knew I would be gone all day and I wanted to have a doggy door so they could go in and out of the doggy door and, you know, bark at squirrels, do their business, be dogs, all of that. So they wouldn't be trapped all day. So I go to this, I think it was just like a rental company, and I let them know I'd like to go see this house and they were gonna give me the keys. And the look on the woman's face was very shocked when I told her I wanted to go see this house, but she seemed happy, like maybe it had been sitting there for a while and she was just happy someone was gonna go see it. And so I just took that as a good sign, like, oh, I'm just lucky that, you know, I get to find this house and it's just like a lucky gem. She gives me the keys and I drive to this house. And upon driving to the house, from the outside, it looks just like the picture. It's very cute. But First impression of the area around the house. So the neighborhood itself is very quiet, and not quiet in a peaceful kind of way, quiet in an eerie kind of way where you don't see anybody. Like, I didn't see a single person on the entire street the entire time I was visiting that day. The next street over is a very busy street in this city in Texas. And this, by the way, is not in the Fort Hood area. This was about 30 minutes outside the city because I wanted to live somewhere that was not right next to the base. So it's not Killeen, Texas. It's right outside. I'm noticing that there's no one really there, but I'm thinking like, well, you know, it's midday. Maybe people are at work. Like, maybe it's just not a street people are normally on. So I didn't really think much of that. And the next thing I noticed is that the house that was right next door was essentially a twin house. It looked exactly the same as the house that I was going to be renting, which again, it's kind of weird, but it's, you know, maybe someone built them both at the same time, like not really like that big of a deal, but just something to notice. I also noticed that there was a car parked outside the house that was the twin house. And I didn't see them going in and out. I just saw that there was a car parked there. So I figured that was my neighbor and maybe I would get to meet them or whoever. I go inside this house and immediately it has that old house charm where you get like the smell of the old wood, the creaky floors, the ceilings are really high and vaulted. The walls are a little bit crooked, you know, like the doors don't really shut all the way. It had like a very, I don't know, like old person charm to it. I know it sounds weird because describing it, most people would be like, why would you move into this house? It sounds like it has so many issues. Because to be honest, I find that kind of thing charming. Just, I thought it was really cool. And I remember walking around and looking, the kitchen looked very vintage. It was cool. It had the black and white tile floor, a very old like gas stove. I walked into the bathroom and the bathroom had a clawfoot tub and super vaulted ceilings. And I thought that was so cool. I've never had a clawfoot tub before. And it had a huge backyard. And I will say that the deck was basically falling apart. It was basically rotting from the inside. So I thought that was a little sketchy, but again, the rent was so cheap that I was thinking, I'm gonna get this whole place to myself and I can be careful on the deck. I can find a way to close the doors. Like, it's not a problem. It's gonna be kind of fun. It's gonna be like a fun experience. After doing the inspection of the house, I think, great, this is awesome. And I'm gonna take it. So I go back to the lady, I sign the lease, and next day I move into this house. I basically had no furniture because again, I was just living on my own. I had a couple of bags of my stuff and my 2 dogs and a few things from my college apartment, but really that was it. So unpacking didn't take very long. Didn't notice this during the day because it wouldn't really be like, it wouldn't be an issue. It's, you know, you wouldn't even notice it during the day. But at night, as I was unpacking things in the kitchen, I noticed that there's no blinds on any of the windows and there's no curtains either. And obviously at night, being a woman in a new house with the lights on, you get very, very creeped out very quickly of the fact that people can see into your house, but you can't see out of the house. So that made me really uncomfortable. And it was one of those things where I was like, I need to get curtains like tomorrow, ASAP. So that was the first time I felt kind of, I guess, uncomfortable or felt something weird in the house. But again, I kind of just chalked it up to being like, maybe it's just the fact that there's no curtains, which obviously that would make anyone uncomfortable. But just note that was the first time I started to feel a little bit weird. A couple of days go by, a couple of weeks, and as I'm living and adjusting to this house, I start to notice really weird things about the house. For example, there were so many cats around the house, and I don't know if this is related to the house being spooky or anything, but it's just something to mention. There were like literally hundreds of cats, and I'm a cat person, so I love cats. It didn't bother me, but it was so weird how many cats were around this neighborhood and this house. Like at night, I would hear them kind of like scratching at the house. Or I remember the first time I had walked into the shed to kind of clean it out and figure out what was back there. I opened the door and there was a mama cat in there with her baby kittens, and she had them up on the shelf, and me opening the door scared her, so she had jumped off the shelf and the shelf actually broke when she jumped off of it, and all her kittens slid down the shelf, and I immediately was like, oh my God, like I didn't know what to do. And so I grabbed all the kittens and I put them in a box and I just sort of like left them on the porch to see if she would come back for them. At this point, I had never fostered kittens before and I would do that whole situation differently, but At the time, I was just like, I don't know what to do. She came back, got her kittens, it was fine. But yeah, so there were just kittens, there were just cats everywhere. Like from the front porch, you could see cats across the street. There was a house. So let me give you like a little setup of also how it looked around the neighborhood. Basically, there was my house, and then there was the twin house that was next to it, to the right of the house. To the left of the house was like the back of a church. You couldn't really see, so it was like almost the end of the street. So there was the church and then the end of the street. And then on the other side was the entrance to the church. And I constantly heard church bells, but I never really saw people going in and out of the church, which I always thought was really weird. And then across the street was, again, the back of somebody's house. It was like a bunch of like foliage, like trees and vines that were wrapped around this fence. And it was like a chain link fence. And so you could kind of still see through it. And I think those people may have fed the cats, because the cats would often go in and out of that yard. But again, I never saw anybody who lived there. I just saw the cats, and I knew that there was a house there. That was all of the people to my vicinity. I mean, the street over from the back of the house across the street was a cross street, and then same with the other side. It was a very small little section of road. So I didn't know anybody who lived there. I never saw my neighbors. I never saw people at the church. I never saw people across the street. I never saw somebody next door, which I thought was super weird, but the car was always there. So again, very strange. And then right down the street past the church was a community college, and I occasionally would see people around the community college, but again, like, did not see very many people. You would think during the middle of the semester, you would see students like walking around constantly, because it was pretty where it was. Like, it was a pretty town, but I never saw anybody walking around. And I would take my dogs like walking around through the campus because it was pretty, and there was a little river near my house. And I just always had this like a really weird vibe. It just felt eerie is the best way to describe it. I didn't feel unsafe. I just felt weird every time I would walk around the campus and walk around the neighborhood. And then down the street towards the other direction, towards my twin house, we'll call it, if you go past that, there was a bunch of really old Victorian houses, and I did see people kind of going in and out of those houses, but a lot of them actually were abandoned, or they just were for rent. I remember this huge purple Victorian house that I thought was so pretty, but definitely looked haunted. So I hope that kind of paints the picture of the area surrounding my little house that I was renting. So as I'm starting to acclimate to the house, I start noticing weird things like the cats. I start hearing footsteps, what sounds like footsteps. And so this house, I'm gonna put like a picture right here so you can see like the layout. And I kind of remember what the layout is, but it might be a little off, but that's pretty much what it looked like. It was like a rectangular 1-story house. So there was no upstairs, but there was a lot of kind of creepy crawl space, or I guess maybe even attic entrances. I did have a few people come for like maintenance stuff, and they kept telling me that there was no attic, it was just a crawl space. So no one could be walking up there, because I was really concerned at first from hearing the footsteps that there was a person up there. And I remember I even called my maintenance, my rental company, and they had somebody come out. They kept telling me it was probably like raccoons or maybe the cats, like something was up there. And I just remember thinking like, I know the difference between a raccoon walking and a person walking, and these are definitely footsteps. And it sounds like it's above me. And if nobody can walk up there, like no one can even stand up there, then where are these footsteps coming from, right? So that was really freaking me out, and I didn't understand what that was. But you know, it's one of those things. I signed the contract and I'm like, well, this is a weird house, but it hasn't really been bothering me, but it really freaks me out. And it's funny because I always tell people this story, and by the time I get to this part where I'm starting to hear footsteps, most people are like, oh, I would get the hell out of there. Like I wouldn't stay there one night. Like I would be out of there in a second. And the thing is, like, you can't. You signed a lease and you can't break that lease unless you have money to pay the rest of the lease. And actually, I remember the second night that I started hearing these footsteps, because the first night I thought maybe it was just like a fluke and I was like just having anxiety, whatever. But the second time it started happening, I could not sleep the whole night. So the next night after that, I got a hotel room. I literally paid money for a hotel down the street so I could have a good night's sleep, so I could figure out what the hell I was gonna do. There's nothing I could do. And you know, as you're 26, you realize like you are now dealing with the consequences of your actions, and the consequences of my actions is sign a lease on a very creepy house. So I had to go back to the house. And another couple of things that would happen is like I'd be watching TV and both my dogs, who are very sweet, very like gentle dogs, they would immediately just look up into the corner and just be staring in the corner. And sometimes they would growl, and my dogs never growl. Like, especially my husky, she is not a growler. I know it's weird, but she's the most gentle, sweet dog ever. She's very quiet, which is very weird for a husky, but she really is. And she would be growling, and they would be looking at the vaulted ceilings, like in the corner, and I would never hear anything. And I never understood like what it was that was setting them off, but it was always something, and they would do it at the same time, just looking up. Freaked me out. It would happen in two places. It would happen in the bedroom, in the master bedroom. It also happened in the living room, but it never really seemed to happen anywhere else. And to me, I felt like the most creepy room, or most haunted, we'll say, room was the master bedroom. And there were two bedrooms that were connected by a very thin wall, and there was a door that you could go in between both the bedrooms. And there was only one bathroom, and it was inside the master room. And at first I was staying in the master room because obviously that's where the bathroom is. But I just felt so uncomfortable, and so like I just felt like something was watching me while I was sleeping. There was one small window in this room, and it was right above the bed, like the back of the room, and it was very small and was facing the other creepy house that was next door, the twin house. And I just felt like claustrophobic in there. I felt really weird. Again, the doors don't close all the way, so the door was directly across from the bed. You could see the dining room from the bedroom, so if you close the door, you don't actually close the door. There's still like a line of visibility that you can see, and you can see the dining room. So if something was walking around in the dining room, you know, your imagination goes crazy, you would see it, and it would freak you out, obviously. And then to the right of the bedroom was this huge closet, like unnecessarily huge, even for me who loves clothes. So it just felt really big and empty, and there was this very, very creepy crawl space in the closet. And obviously that I want nothing to do with that. But the first like super scary thing that happened to me had to do with that crawl space. And man, the first very scary thing that happened to me in that house was in this crawl space, or around the crawl space. I remember showing this crawl space to my mom over FaceTime, and I remember telling her, well, at least it has a lock, and I'm glad that it's locked. Showing her FaceTime, she saw it, everything. And I remember like a couple of weeks later or something, I was in the closet and I was getting ready for work or just doing something, and I turned around and I saw the crawl space and the lock. It had one of those hitch locks, like a little latch that went like this. The latch was open. Yeah, latch open. I was like, how did that open? I did not touch that. No one's even been in here. Remember, I had no friends. No one's coming over to my house. I didn't know anybody. So that scared me so bad. So after that, I moved into the other room, and my closet became basically the floor in the other room. I refused to go into that actual closet. So now all of my stuff is in the back room, which has more windows and somehow feels a little less creepy. I don't know why, but it just felt less creepy. And a lot of the stuff in the beginning of this house, and also as it was going on living there, it had to do with the way that I felt. I would say I'm an empath. I feel a lot of things really deeply and easily. And when you would walk into this house, your emotions would become so heavy. Like whatever your emotion was, whether it was anxiety or depression or loneliness or anger, like not a positive emotion, anything negative would just become so much heavier. And my entire life have been a very big introvert. I've been someone who's really independent, and I do really well on my own. But as soon as I would walk into that house, I felt the weight of the world on me. I felt so incredibly dark and lonely and sad and depressed. And I had never really experienced that before. And I will like give merit to the fact that I was alone for the first time in my life. So it's not like these emotions were coming out of nowhere, but to the extent that they were happening as soon as I entered that house was pretty weird. And as soon as I left the house, like for example, when I went to go stay in that hotel, it was like the weight was lifted. And it was so bizarre how it was like going through this veil, like in and out. So that was a really weird thing and tough thing to deal with. I remember telling my mom and like friends over the phone, like, this place is definitely haunted. It's really freaky. I do not want to live here anymore. I hate living here. My mom didn't really believe me. I think like she's more of a realist, so she wasn't really like on board with the fact that it might be haunted, but she definitely humored me every time I called her in tears, which I am very grateful for. So I was dating this guy who was out of town, and I had met him previously from a school that I was in the army before I had moved to Texas. And so I would tell him over the phone like all this creepy stuff that would happen, and he's just like, he was a believer, so he was like, well, that's really scary, like I want to see if that stuff happens when I get there. He comes to visit me. We're sleeping, and we're sleeping in this back room, and all of a sudden around like 3 a.m. his head like perks up, and he's just like, and I can hear what he hears, and it's the footsteps, and I see his head going like this, following the footsteps that we hear, and he looks at me and goes, is that what you've been hearing? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, that definitely sounds like footsteps. And I was like, yeah, it does. So that was a little validating to have somebody finally, like, somebody also experience what I was going through. Not that I want someone to be terrified, but it made me feel like I wasn't crazy. I wasn't going through this like really weird existential crisis at 25, 26 years old. So at that point, after talking to him, talking to my mom, whatever, I was like, okay, I just need a roommate, because I don't know that anything bad is gonna happen to me, but I feel really unhappy being here alone, and maybe just having somebody to go through all of this together with would make me feel a little less scared all the time, because at this point I was getting maybe like 2 hours of sleep a night. I had started to make a few friends in my unit. So in the army, when you're deployed, there's like a very few select group of people who stay back to kind of like take care of all the stragglers or anything that needs to happen like in the US while all the rest of the unit is deployed. So there was a few girls my age and my rank who had stayed back who were doing that. And I had met them, and we kind of started to become friends. And one of them needed a place to stay. And I was like, I have a house, it's kind of haunted, but if you want to live with me, I have a house and it's really cheap rent. And she was like, sure. So she moved in. Again, very validating to have somebody who lived in the house with me who experienced these kinds of things. We would talk about it or be like, oh yeah, I get this super weird feeling, or like whatever. Nothing really major happening for a couple of months, just, you know, footsteps, weird feelings, cold spots, weird sounds, that kind of thing. Until one night. This was a night that her and I both were in our separate rooms. I was still sleeping in the, we'll call it the guest room or the second bedroom, and I gave her the master bedroom because I did not want to sleep in there. It was probably like, I think it was like 11:30. It was a very specific time, and I think it was like 11:34 or something. And I know it's specific time because all of a sudden we're sleeping, or I was like falling asleep sitting on my phone, whatever. I hear a high-pitched scream that sounded like it was coming from the house, but like the very front of the house. I was like, oh my God, something's happened to my roommate. So I come running out, and she comes running out, and she was like, did you hear that? And I was like, yeah, I thought it was you. She's like, I thought it was you. Was neither of us. It sounded like it was in the house, and it was just like a blood-curdling scream. We were really freaked out at that point. Once again, didn't get very much sleep that night. Triple locked the doors kind of thing. Probably slept with the TV on that night, honestly. The super weird thing is, the next day, same exact time, it was like 11:34, because I remember looking at the clock both times. I think I was on my phone both times. The exact same thing happened. That same freaky scream happened that sounded like it was coming from the front porch or the front of the house, like in the vicinity, but just in the front. And she had a boyfriend staying over at the time, and I was just alone in my room, and all of us come out to the living room, and we're like, what the hell is that? Why does that keep happening? And he heard it, and he was like, I'm gonna go outside and see what the hell's going on, because he thought maybe it was some kids like messing with us or something. So he goes out to the street, and he's like walking along the street, sees nothing, hears nothing, comes back, he's like, it's eerily quiet out there. I saw nothing, saw nobody, like, I don't know what the hell that was. That was really weird. And I was like, since I've lived here, I haven't seen people on this street. I haven't seen my neighbors. I haven't seen people in the church. I don't know where all the people are. You know, one street over, there's a bunch of people. It's a busy street, people are driving, whatever. But then you come on the street and it's like a ghost town. Literally. So that was probably the second big scary event that ended up happening that was very unexplainable. We were out with some other friends who we were like getting drinks at this bar, and we were telling these friends about how haunted our house was and how freaky it was. And this friend was like, we should look it up. We should Google it and see like what is it? Like, why is it so? Maybe it's on like some sort of like website or whatever. And we did find out. So the house has a plaque on it, and it's part of the historical registry of houses in Texas, meaning that it's so old that it's a protected house because it was built, I believe, in 1913. When you look up the address of the house, the first thing that comes up is most haunted street in Texas. We were like, are you kidding me? So we click on it, and it's got like, you know, a very small blurb about like all the haunted weird things that happen in this town in Texas. The whole town that we are living in apparently is very haunted, but particularly the street that we lived on. So we were like, you know, well, okay, so our house is definitely haunted, great. A couple more months go by. She ends up moving out because she finds another place to live unrelated to the spooky stuff. So now I'm stuck in this house alone with my dogs. This was like basically the worst time in my life because I had gone through all of this stuff alone, finally found someone to go through it with me, and then they left, and so then I was back alone. So I already knew all the crazy stuff that was happening, and now I had to deal with it alone. If you were in the army, or you are in the army, or you've been in a job where you're working so much and away from home, you know how hard it is to take care of dogs and take care of your animals and give them like, you know, the life that they need and they deserve. And during this time, I just got so busy. We kept going to what we call the field, which is basically, we would be like camping. I'm gonna call it camping for like a week at a time. And I would be away, and I'd have to like pay someone to come or try to find someone to watch the animals, watch my dogs. So at this point I was like, because I knew my whole summer was gonna be like that. And this was like April. I asked my mom to watch my dogs for me. And so she took them. She lived in Colorado. So she came, drove it, got them, and then drove them back to Colorado. So I was completely alone. This was such a dark time for me. Like so freaked out, so scared, so lonely. Had very little friends. I remember all the people came back from the deployment around this time. It was like I had never even been a part of their lives. I was not included in their friend group anymore. So I felt even more alone. And the thing is, I feel like with ghosts or negative spirits, they tend to feed off of negative energy. And as time went on, my emotions got worse and worse and darker and darker. And I feel like that's when things started getting worse in the house. Like I guess it started ramping up, getting a little bit more frequent, more intense. Cabinets slamming randomly, or doors being like swinging open and just left open. Like I said, like things being unlocked when I never unlocked them, footsteps constantly, just weird noises, very uncomfortable feelings in the house. I hated it. I absolutely hated it. But again, I had signed this lease that I couldn't get out of. But one day I randomly get this note on my door, and it's from the university, and the university is asking me to call them because they would like to talk to me about my lease. And so I give them a call, really confused, like where this is going. And they basically offer to buy me out of my lease because they want to take this house and the house that's next door and basically turn it into student housing. When I tell you, I literally cried tears of happiness. I was like, oh my God, this is the best day of my life. I'm so happy, like I get to leave this place. And they basically gave me like 2 weeks, and they were like, yeah, well, can we like get you out basically in 2 weeks, which would be like the start of their summer semester, and they could, you know, have students move in. And I was like, absolutely, I'll move out yesterday. Well, there was a light at the end of the tunnel, which made me very happy, and it really did start to make me feel better. One of the last nights that I was staying there, which this night was the scariest thing that happened by far of everything in that house. And of course it was like one of the last times, thank God, that I had to stay there. So it was just a regular night, just like a regular Tuesday night or whatever. I go to sleep, and and I had moved at this point back into the bigger room because I was tired of having to go in and out to get to the bathroom. And I knew like I wasn't gonna be living there that much longer. So I was like, whatever. I'm sleeping, and then out of nowhere, I just hear the sound of something going through trash. And I was like thinking like, my dogs never go through trash. This is super weird. Like I'm like very annoyed that they're going through trash right now, but also why are they going through my trash? And as I'm like sleepily like rubbing my eyes and getting ready to go yell at my dogs, it like hits me, like smacks me in the face. I don't have my dogs. my dogs are staying with my mom. And my heart literally dropped into my stomach because I realized I don't know what the hell is going through my trash now because my dogs aren't here. Also, I said this from the beginning, in the very beginning, there was a doggy door that my dogs would use to go in and out. So I called my mom and I was like, I'm freaking out. There's something in my house. It's going through my trash. I don't know what the hell is going on. I don't know what it is. And my mom's like, well, maybe something's going in and out of the doggy door. And I'm like, there was a lid or like a cap that you could put on the doggy door so things couldn't go in and out. And as soon as the dogs had left, I remember I capped it because I didn't need it to be open anymore and I didn't want like those random cats coming in the house. So I was like, I don't think that's it unless whatever it did like burst through that thing and broke in to get into here. And so I was like, there's no way it's that. She's like, well, go figure out what it is. My mom, one of the bravest ladies alive, like no sympathy for me being scared. She was like, well, grab something and go figure out what it is. So I have her on the phone. I'm like looking for the nearest thing that could be like a weapon, and I find a clothes hanger. So I grab my clothes hanger. I'm going to show you my little map that I drew again. So I go through the door to the second bedroom, and I'm creeping around with my little hanger like this, and I'm walking. I open that little door and I look into the second bedroom. There's nothing there. So then I start creeping around and I start going towards the door that goes through the laundry room that'll look straight into the kitchen. And I look over, like I peer over the side, and I see trash just flying everywhere, like going like this. And you could see the trash can kind of from if you peered over the side of the door in the kitchen, like all the way through the kitchen, but not completely. You could kind of see the edge of it. I just saw like literally trash going like this. And I'm like, what the f-? So I freak out. I'm like, I don't even want to deal with any of that. Like, I don't know what that is. And I run back into my room and like close the doors that don't close. And at this point, I start hearing the cabinets going. I hear them like all opening, closing, and it's like loud. It's very loud at this point. And I'm in my room just shaking, talking to my mom, like I'm crying. I don't know what to do. And she doesn't know what to do. She's just trying to stay on the phone with me. Eventually, like I'm crying myself, the noises kind of stop and I cry myself to sleep. My mom gets off the phone. So it's daytime. It's like maybe around 7:30 in the morning. I grab my weapon again, my little clothes hanger, and I start walking around to go see what had happened in the kitchen because it was quiet now. And I look and I walk into the kitchen and there is literally nothing wrong with the kitchen. There's no trash out. All the cabinets are closed except one cabinet was left open. Everything looked normal except the one cabinet. And if I had not been talking to my mom on the phone, I would have thought I was crazy or dreaming it. But she was on the phone with me and knew that all that crazy stuff was happening and I was crying. Also, the fact that one cabinet was still left open, I don't know what it was. To this day, I don't know what it was. I moved out a couple days after that and thank God, like, did not have to stay there anymore. But that place wreaked havoc on my mental health like no other. I've never been so terrified of living in a space in my entire life. When I was still living there, like in Texas, I would occasionally kind of like drive by the house and just kind of see like, you know, like are students living there? Like have they taken it down or have things changed at all? And literally, I'm not kidding, every time I drove by that house, it looked exactly the same. Nobody was living there and I could tell no one was living there because there was no curtains up in the living room. You could see like inside the house that there was no furniture, and the next door neighbor was still that same car, but I never saw a person. And it was like a new car too. It was, I mean, not a nice car, but it was like a newer car, like not an old abandoned vehicle. Literally somebody's nice car was in that parking space. Nobody that I ever saw moved into that house that I had lived in. I imagine if anyone else moved in there, they probably had a similar experience to me and maybe they broke their lease. But yeah, that is my haunted house story. And I hope that it was spooky, but not too spooky. And yeah, man, I love spooky stuff, but when it's happening to you in the moment, it's not as fun as when you're listening to other people tell their own spooky stories. But I hope you guys enjoyed that. And I hope you guys have a very safe and fun Halloween, and I will see you next time.